Feminine Fusion is a show that highlights the influence of women in classical music, and it's new in our Saturday night offerings here on WUOL. I'm Colleen Phelps, and this special look behind the playlist, Feminine Fusion host Diane Jones tells us why it's important to take some time and make sure you're listening to what music women have to make.
So, what is the origin story of Feminine Fusion?
Feminine Fusion came about because I am a composer and I became more and more aware of how underrepresented women were in music, which honestly surprised me. I grew up in a house full of men. I have 4 brothers, no sisters, and it was always expected that I would be on a par with any of the boys. Even when I was an undergraduate, and I went back to undergraduate in my 40s and had the opportunity to talk to Jennifer Higdon, who had just written her concerto for orchestra for the Philadelphia Orchestra. And I asked her, I said, have you experienced discrimination or lesser opportunities because you're a woman? And she said, no, I don't look for them. I don't expect them. I don't interpret whatever happens that way, and I don't see it. And that resonated with me. But the longer I've been in radio, the longer I've been exposed to more and more music, the more I realize that women are underrepresented. So my goal is not to lower the other part of the playing field, but to make sure that women are brought up to the level that they deserve and an equal level with anyone else in the classical music world. It's not a matter of stomping on someone else to elevate yourself, but making sure that you're recognized for your accomplishments. So that was kind of the genesis of Feminine Fusion. And I saw a need. I saw that there wasn't anything really. There were very, very few programs devoted to women. So I decided to go ahead and jump in.
By the time the music gets to us, it has to have been in the hands of played by professionals, which means it has to have gotten into the hands of professionals or sometimes really high level students. And then, but that means it has to have gotten to a publisher, and that means it has to have gotten somewhere else. And all of that, what I've noticed is if you think of that as a pipeline, everywhere on the pipeline, when equity comes up, people point backwards on the pipeline and say, well, there's not a lot published. Well, there's not a lot available. Well, there's not a lot. Where in the pipeline do you really think the cracks are? Or do you think it's little cracks along the way?
I think it's a lot of little cracks along the way. Some of it comes down to geographically where you're located. I mean, the Sphinx organization for promoting minority musicians and composers is phenomenal, but you kind of have to get access to them. Part of it is optics. If you walk into a concert hall and you sit down with any orchestra and you look on stage, there are very few minority faces up there. You're seeing more women, but a child who is in the audience and looks on stage and says, oh, that person looks like me, they're going to be more inclined to say, I can do that. But if you look up on stage and you say, oh, there's nobody on that stage who even looks like me, there's no way I can do this, they won't even try. So it's a multifaceted approach that we have to take. We have to make sure that very young people see the opportunities that they should be afforded. And then the more opportunities we have for things like blind auditions. When blind auditions for orchestras finally became the de facto way of auditioning, the number of minority and female instrumentalists, orchestra musicians, shot up because there was no longer the perception when that person stood in front of you that this is how they would sound. This would be the level of talent they have, or this would be the maximum level of talent that they could achieve, or this would be all the time they could give you. I can't hire a woman because she's going to get pregnant and go out on maternity leave, and I'm going to be stuck with a hole in my orchestra. That has nothing to do with anything. Their talent and their abilities are the only thing that should matter. And those blind auditions took away that barrier. Unfortunately, we can't take that barrier down for a conductor. You have to see a conductor.
Or a composer.
Or a composer. You still have to see that. With a composer, if you've got blind entries into competitions for emerging composers, that can be very helpful. Or if you have a non-gender specific name or a non-gender perceived name, you've got a Leslie or a Tracy or a Morgan, that could be male, female, non-binary, that really could be anything. One of the things I do, because I came to composing so late, is I don't put my birth date down, because I started seriously composing in my 40s. So my sensibilities are more 2000s, 21st century sensibilities, rather than what I would have been doing if I had gone to college for music straight out of high school in 1980. I try to eliminate that bias by not putting that expectation out. The hardest thing is to educate people on where to set aside their expectations. So it has to come from a lot of different places. And you'll get somebody like Mayan Chen in the Chicago Sinfonietta doing Project W, where they're commissioning nothing but women composers. You've got a lot of orchestras that are working very, very hard to make sure they include women composers on their programming so that it becomes the norm, without jumping up and down and saying, look, 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 it's women. Let's just do it. There's nothing wrong with just making sure there's women there. And if people notice that they're women, fine. If they don't notice that they're women, actually, in some ways, that's even better, because they're going to be listening to the music, not worrying about their perception of someone's gender.
Who are some of the women whose stories you've told who have really surprised you with their story?
I keep diving into different women, and I love when somebody comes up to me and says, did you hear about this person? I got handed a CD from a friend of mine on Henriette Boesmans, and I had never heard of her before. It was a complete CD of her music. So I said, well, okay, here we go. Let's at least put her on a program. And then I started reading her biography and found out about her family history, and that her music had been banned for a while, and that it was all tied up in the Nazi occupations. And that was a story worth telling. So someone like that is worth telling. The girls, all girls orchestra in Afghanistan just still breaks my heart when I think of it. And especially with the things that are going on right now, they literally took their lives in their hands, even before this past year with the change in regime. 3 years ago, they were taking their lives in their hands every time they went out, put their instruments in a separate bus, because people would stop the vehicle and destroy their instruments to prevent them from playing. They finished a concert one night, packed up to leave, and the gentleman who ran the women's school was caught in a bomb blast and injured. When you hear about people who are literally taking their lives in their hands just to create beautiful music, it's awesome in the most genuine sense of that word.
And then there's sometimes a paradigm that occurs when we think about, okay, we're looking at music by women, which means it's going to be more graceful. It's going to be more lovely. It's going to be more genteel, as opposed to the music by men that's going to be so strong and powerful. Who are the women who have really broken that down for you?
There are a lot. Joan Tower's Strike Zone that she wrote for Evelyn Glennie is wonderful. I love Evelyn Glennie. I had a chance to meet a marvelous percussionist, Lisa Pager, who I learned about her because she was the guest artist at our orchestra here in Syracuse. And when she handed me her CDs and I started listening, I went, wow, this is fantastic. Pamela Z does some incredibly innovative work. Kuneva, she does some marvelous, marvelous work. And I'm hearing more and more women doing things in like video games, which has traditionally been a very much a bastion of a man's world, very much a bastion of masculinity. So there's some great people coming out with wonderful and innovative music. And then of course you have to talk about people like Meredith Monk. Every time I turn around, there's always something to surprise me. So it's very, very hard to go this one and this one.
It's late August, and that means school is starting or has
Mhm.
started. And there are a lot of young women who just entered their collegiate composition program. What is your advice as a composer yourself and someone who tells the stories of so many women in music to these young composers?
First and foremost, learn as much as you can. Go out of your comfort zone, because only by going out of your comfort zone can you really feel confident within your comfort zone. And it may change slightly. That's first. Second is, don't worry over much about what other people are saying. Other students especially who will talk about how yours is so different from theirs, which means it is less than. And that kind of goes across the board, but depending on where you are, who's in the program at the moment, people speak with a lot of confidence. You'll always come across somebody with a lot of confidence who says, oh yeah, I'm a pretty lyrical composer. Oh, you're just a romantic kind of thing. No, not really. You haven't heard my electronic stuff, have you? So don't be afraid to try something new and listen to the people you respect. Hopefully you're in a program where you've really researched your composition professors, and that's why you're there. That's why I chose the programs I chose, because I really wanted to learn from those composition professors, learn from their style and their experiences. They're the ones that count. The people who are your peers, it's great to converse with them, but your mentors are the ones you really want to listen to and follow till you get out. And then it becomes all you. So don't be afraid of being the person that you are. Don't apologize for yourself. The worst thing you can do is apologize for yourself. I'll tell a story. I had defended my master's and I was having my last one-on-one composition lesson. In that time between doing my master's exam and my final lesson, I broke my arm. So I couldn't write anything. I literally couldn't write anything. So he did a great thing. He said, let's do role playing. I want to commission something. Why should I commission it from you? Incredibly valuable, because I had to articulate what my value was and what my aesthetic was. One of the things he said to me was, who are your influences? I said, Copland and Stravinsky, because of Copland's openness and because of Stravinsky's percussion and rhythm. And then I said, I'll never be a Copland or a Stravinsky. And he said, stop. You have no idea whether you will be the next Copland or Stravinsky. That's only something time will tell. Don't you ever say that again. And I haven't. It was shocking to me. I actually wound up in tears because it was so incredibly uplifting to hear somebody say, yeah, you could be Copland or Stravinsky. That's not for me to say. That's for history to say, if it ever does. If it does, great. If it doesn't, fine. But I'm able to be Diane Jones. I'm able to be myself and share my music. And if somebody is touched by my music, that's all that counts.
Diane Jones hosts Feminine Fusion Saturday nights at 9 on 90.5 WUOL Classical Louisville.